agenda proper. And agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. And apologies have been received from Councillor John Mason, Councillor Bob Milne and Councillor David Sharp. Substitute members, Councillor Hoy is substituting for Councillor Mason, Councillor Foster is substituting for Councillor Milne and Councillor Cross is substituting for Councillor Sharp. Agenda item 3, non-members attending. Councillor Mrs Wilson, Councillor Mrs Belton is attending for item 6 as the portfolio holder, and Councillor F. Day and Williams are attending for item 9 of the agenda as portfolio holders. Also in attendance we have Councillor Wootton, Councillor Mrs Rowe and Councillor Ward. So welcome all of you to the meeting. Thank you. Agenda item 4, members, is the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of April 2022. Are the minutes agreed, members?
Agreed, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Those minutes are agreed. Agenda item 5 is to receive declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, members?
Nobody's indicating, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. None indicating. Thank you. Move on to agenda item 6, which is the economic growth strategy. Before I introduce the Assistant Director for Place and Environment to introduce the report, I'll just remind you of the procedure for if we make recommendations. So what will happen is, if as a result of our discussions we make recommendations, I'll ask you to state the recommendation, and then what we'll do is the officers will then type those up. We'll take a short break, and then we'll come back into the room and those recommendations will be shown on the screen for everyone to vote on. Okay. So I would like to invite Marcus Houghton, the Assistant Director for Place Environment, to introduce the report, please.
Good evening, members. The economic growth strategy before you this evening sets out the key themes, priorities and objectives that the Council aspires to deliver. It replaces the last such strategy from 2017 and is based on 3 main themes. Firstly, supporting the local business growth. Secondly, attracting new investment. And finally, improving the skills base of residents. The themes have provided a set of deliverable objectives for the next 3 years that reflect the Council's current ambitions. The draft strategy is appended to the report, and I am happy to take any questions regarding the matter. Thank you.
Are there any questions, members? Councillor Mrs McPherson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going to get my notes. Sorry, Marcus, there are a few. First of all, if I can draw everybody's attention to page 6.2, 5.1. The amount of 10,000 to improve place promotion materials and branding seems more than a tad steep to me. I would like to know what we're actually spending that on, because my recommendation would be that we reduce that figure to 5,000, which would then allow for a further 5,000 to be invested into the skills training initiatives that are included in the document. Okay. There is no mention of our NEET. I know that we have a low percentage in relation to the rest of the UK of NEET is not in employment, education or training. But what plans are there for this cohort? How will the training needs be matched to meet the local skills gap? There's a couple of questions there. Page 6.7, there's obvious numbers missing to the opening paragraph, if we can have those. And I would also like to know, will REBA mention within this document, and this is a recommendation, that REBA encourages businesses to be more responsible. And when I say that, I mean corporate social responsibility. Many top employers have strong community relationships through social value policies. There is also a lot of mention around the objectives and the aims within this paper, but there's no clear KPIs, if there could be some key performance indicators. So that is a recommendation as well. Did I make those recommendations clear enough? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr Houghton, would you like to answer that first, and then I'll come on to you, Councillor Hoy.
Yeah, thank you. So the sort of budget spending, it is only sort of indicative, and so we're happy to consider tweaking that or changing it as may come along. But they're indicative budgets. But the 10K is also for a video promotion as well. So it's making a video of the sort of the district as a promotional piece. So that's why it's a little bit on the higher side than perhaps you'd expect to see originally. But there are other reserves available anyway. So if additional is required for addressing training needs, then I think we'd be able to find that anyway on that matter. With the NEAT, we can mention that explicitly within there. There is obviously a mention of training programs, but I think it's quite high level as a strategy. So we've not gone into too much detail, but certainly we can flesh it out in a work programme that can come back if you require. But we're trying to keep the strategy fairly sort of slim, so I didn't want to go into too much detail at this stage. With REBA, similar again. I think we probably think there is the pledge, and so a lot of the things you mentioned about the social corporate responsibilities within that pledge. So again, as REBA is launched, you'll see some of that detail fleshing out within the launch. But again, it's quite high level this to sort of tuck in there, I think. And yeah, the KPIs, yes, we think we're aware of that. I think that's something we'd want to bring back to the group. It's to bring back to this committee, so to have a look at really. So we'd actually report back on those, and we accept that there does need to be some KPIs attached to this strategy. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Is that?
If I can just come back on one point, you mentioned around the media and the filmmaking. A possible other recommendation for consideration would be that it is local and possibly engage with our schools. I believe both the senior schools, the sixth formers, have very good media groups within there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a couple of points. I think Councillor McPherson did raise the KPIs I was going to raise because I'm keen on KPIs. First of all, I just want to say that I'm very disappointed that there's no, in the three, which I've now lost, the three, they're here somewhere. Within the growth, the three threads, there's no mention of carbon neutrality by 2030. I know we're talking about that as a council aim, but there is a consultation going to happen in the autumn, I believe, for the whole district about this, and I think we've missed a trick, if you like, by not linking this growth strategy. Growth is a little bit odd as well in a finite planet, but growth strategy without mentioning it or linking it to carbon neutrality. That's a comment. I don't know how you can deal with that at the moment, because it would mean rewriting this properly, and that might be going a bit too far, but I think it's a bit disappointing there. On some specific points, within the actual task we're going to undertake, one is about encouraging businesses to use, or it says develop Rochford Local as an online directory and town centre guide. Is that within one of these costs of the 10,000s or the 5,000s, or has that already been paid for? I think that's been. I think that may have been started or not. I'm not quite sure, so I'd like some clarity on that. And I'm not sure why I don't know why we need to use Rochford Local. Surely it would be better to encourage businesses to use Google or Google Business, which is much more powerful. It isn't a cost to us. and it would be much more effective to bring people into the district, because people coming into the district won't know about Rochford local. I'll leave the business part. There's talk about the final point I'm going to make is about the High Street Conference. I've met some consultants in the High Street of Radio. I couldn't do the other ones. They seem to have come back with I think that was to bring back the High Street. I'm aware of free market radicals have done some good research in Raleigh, Hockley and Rochford. I understand Rochford Parish Council has taken up the free market radical ideas and are running with those. I think, don't know if anyone's from Raleigh Town Council here, but I think Raleigh Town Council are also looking at this and I think Councillor Belton is, aren't you? And I think they've spoke about that at their last meeting and maybe bring those in. And I want to know why we aren't using their data. And is the information they've gained, do you expect it to be much different from a High Street conference, or will you use that to feed into the High Street conference? That's it, really.
Okay, Stop.
Okay, so I think the first one, the green economy, noted, but like you say, it's more of an observation than a recommendation at this stage. Yeah,
It's too big.
The Rochford local, it's I think something we're going to trial, but I take your point that Google Business, is also an effective medium. So it's something to trial, but then reflect on.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just come back on this? I think it's very important that I've been here quite a long time, and sometimes I think Councillor McPherson, Councillor McPherson will remember this, and some of the longest serving councillors remember this. But we've been here before, and it failed before. Why would you think it'd be different? I can't remember what it was called. It was Shop at My Local, and it was no different to this in my view. It was an online directory, and it never got particularly good hits or anything. Nothing. And I just wonder why we think doing the same thing again will work better this time.
Sometimes it does.
I know it does. I hate to say that we've done it before.
Yeah, so you can't write things off completely. I think there was one. There was request to see that tried again. I think so. It is part of the funding that's already paid for. So there is. I guess let's see if it works this time. But, and if it does, it does. It doesn't, then I think if Google Business is more effective, then we'll try that in future.
Can I just come back? Can we try both?
Well,
encourage both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could that be a recommendation that rather than just use Rochford local, that we should also encourage?
I think we'd look to
we
use.
should have a plan to encourage businesses to use Google Business.
I think in a high-level sense, yeah, we'd look to all mediums to try and promote businesses within the district. So yes.
I think it should be in here. Is that
explicitly
okay to go forward as a
More
recommendation?
than happy, sir.
Right,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for interrupting.
Can I just ask you if Councillor Rock would like to repeat that and then they can note?
Okay.
So, is the recommendation that we encourage businesses to use Google Business as well as Rochford Local?
And I think on the last question, yeah, we will look at all sources of data going forward for the High Street Conference. That'd be foolish not to.
Will you be speaking to free market radicals?
Yes, we will be. Yeah.
They are based in Rochford Square.
Yes, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Gooding.
I think Councillor Hoyer's probably pipped me at the post there with the free market radicals, as I was just going to recommend new innovative providers as opposed to the existing known people within Rochford District Council. So thank you for that, Councillor Hoyer. And the entrepreneurial, there are others that are local that we could tap into, like you've already mentioned. So I'm going to leave that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mr Newport.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think we've already, Councillor Hoy's already mentioned KPIs, and one of the things that I'd be keen to to discuss and to recommend is that the analytics from, we need to have the analytics for this Rochford local directory. How are we going to measure the success of some of these schemes? I think it's very important to understand how that's going to be measured and at what point is it deemed a success. I mean, we've got, you know, you can launch a website, that's fine, anyone can do that, but how much money is going to be poured into it? Is it capped at £10,000? I mean, what's the marketing budget behind it? Is that included in the 10,000 or is that just the development cost? It's all very well just putting it up there, but if no one knows about it, it's not going to get very far. I'm just going to come back to the pre-meeting notes because there was another question I don't think has been asked on here. Just bear with me. Yeah, so one of the notes that we've got down here is about item 3.3. The new strategy has been designed to be a concise document which can be used to underpin specific actions. And I think Councillor Mason had asked, how will ordinary members be advised when the SMART objectives have been set and what are they for each subset or work stream, and to be able to have a performance report at that level over the year? I think that was already, I don't know if that's already been put to the officer. One of the other recommendations that I'd like to put forward is that RDC look at the partnership between Brentwood, to look at the ideas and resources that they have and the skills that they've already been using, because I know their economic strategy, I suppose, is more advanced than ours in some respects. So that would be one of the recommendations that I'd like to make.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Houghton, would you like to comment on any of those?
I think the key one is on around the objectives. I think without the KPIs, they're not smart. So I think the KPIs, so you've got the action plan, sort of the year ahead mapped out, but I think what that needs to be underpinned by is those KPIs. So then you'll be able to measure whether we've actually achieved against those. But I take your point, is they do need to be smart rather than just, at the moment, they're aspirational. So that does need to be sort of, but I said that suite of KPIs, I think, would be the way to do that. So the recommendation regarding the working with Brentwood, I think it is a given, really. But yes, that's happy to have that explicitly written in there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Belton, I think you wanted to say something.
Thank you. In response to that and a couple of other questions, if I may just cover them all off. The carbon neutral element, I completely agree, but it's captured within REBA. So REBA is a part of the strategy, and the carbon neutral message will come fully through the REBA incentive. So I hope that will pick that up and obviously gain momentum as it launches. KPIs, absolutely, I agree with Councillor McPherson. It was one of the first things that I pointed out, that these objectives have got to be measurable. If they're not measurable, they may as well not be there, because we don't know if we're succeeding in our goals. And as Marcus has pointed out, we feel the best way to do that is actually come back to this committee with a set of KPIs to be scrutinised, essentially. And they need to be measurable. That's really important. And one of those would be the NEAT figures, because I think one of our KPIs should be that we reduce that figure over the course of a year. There's no point investing in training and skills and development and coaching if it doesn't create any employment at the end of it. So I think we have the same ideas as that. It's just about getting that on paper for a set of KPIs. Regarding the High Street Conference and the external data, it's very important that we bring in all the data that's already been captured over the past year, 2 years, 3 years, but also look to develop really localised data as well. We need to be able to, as a council, reach out and find ways to contact landlords of some of the empty buildings, for example, something that is notoriously difficult to do. So this is about encapsulating a broader set of data that we can use to develop and really build on with the economic strategy over the course of the year. And everything else, I think, has been covered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chairman. On behalf of my absent colleague, Councillor David Sharp, a question that he wanted to 6.7, and it mentions the port of Creeksea and also the Thames Freeport. His question relates to the perceived, or one of the perceived touted benefits of Brexit being free ports, and could it be a consideration or recommendation that we look at the possibility of a free port in Rochford, i.e. Creeksea? Obviously it would mean a big expansion and potential, but the potential for employment in that free port is very significant. A question of my own, which relates to item 5. Sorry, it's not item 5. Councillor Mrs. Belton mentioned REBA. Could we consider looking at car parking charges in Rayleigh as a means of encouraging shoppers into Rayleigh? I believe other towns in the local area have lesser car parking charges. I know this is a difficult one, but you have to find the right balance between getting the revenue in, but by reducing car parking charges, it may be possible to actually increase revenue. So will that be a consideration going forward to attract more people to Rayleigh Town Centre?
Thank you, Councillor Cross. Do you want to talk about free ports?
I mean, under the it's trying not to be too prescriptive in what is a very sort of high-level strategy, but we have creating economic opportunities. We sort of mentioned sort of about Thames Freeport, Lower Thames Crossing Airport Business Park. I mean, certainly it is within that spirit that it would, if it's something that could be done, then I don't see why we shouldn't be looking at that, you know, at this stage, you know. But the feasibility of that, you know, in my head says that it'd be very hard to achieve, but equally it'd be wrong just to rule something out. But I'd be reluctant to have that in there as an absolute line to say we're looking at something that is literally a seed within this discussion. But I think it sits within that sort of spirit of that area, if that makes sense. In terms of the thorny question of car parking charges, I mean, we have a car parking strategy that we've recently created. Certainly the High Streets conference, I suspect will be something again that we can touch on then, but I wouldn't want to be too prescriptive to say that we will look at doing a specific thing for X, Y and Z within such a broad strategy, but certainly it's something that can be picked up within the High Street conference. I have a view that, you know, it could be counterproductive having low costs, so I think to have anything that's too prescriptive at this point, what we're aspiring to do is to create a higher footfall within High Street. I think is what we're wanting to achieve. The means of that, I think, is beyond the high level approach of this document at this time. But I do take your point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Chair. Most of the things I was going to point out have been covered, but there's one in particular that I think we do need to address. If I could go back to 6.2, the resource implications, the bottom, where we're looking at £10,000 to improve place promotion, materials and branding. Obviously, you could put that under the classification of beautification of the council. If I was coming in from outside and looking at £10,000 being spent on or allocated for beautification of the council and £5,000 being addressed for projects emerging throughout the year, my view that I would go away with would be that the council are actually more interested in what they look like than they are in business. So I would suggest that however it goes, and I do take Marcus's explanation where we can get money out of various budgets to play around with these, but in this document here, that we do make the allowances for addressing projects that are emerging throughout the years and the skills training initiatives higher in value than to improve place promotion, materials and branding.
Thank you. Mr. Horton?
I think if that gives the committee comfort, then I'm happy to take the recommendation forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. I haven't got any recommendations other than just an observation, really. My first observation has been answered already, because when I first read this report, not having seen one of these before, I'm not quite sure why, but maybe it's because I've only been on the council 3 years, but I thought this was very bland, but now you've explained that it's sort of high level, and that explains why. With regards to my question, though, is I'm reassured to hear that there's KPIs are going to come back to this committee for us to look at. What every plan that any company or any organisation has to have set review periods to see whether it's working. So the first point is, what review periods are we proposing to put in place for this? And the second question is it aspirational for the council? Are you hoping to achieve all of these this municipal year, or what timescale are you putting to them?
So, in terms of reporting, I think we're anticipating reporting annually on progress, and saying that that's a sort of a written report formally coming back in annually. I mean, clearly, obviously, I'll be liaising with the portfolio holder more regularly in that reporting on sort of progress throughout the year. In terms of there's an annual, there's at the end a year's worth of what we intend to achieve. That realistically sets out what the officer can achieve, and the aims and the sort of objectives of 2023 on 6.11 sets out what we'd aim to achieve realistically. They are broad, in terms of what can be achieved, but they are aspirational, but they are achievable as well. So we're not putting anything. So there was, for example, suggestions of seed banks. I think in terms of which would be beyond, I believe, the resource that we have available. But we have tailored this to what we feel is the resource available at this time.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Observations. Our vision for Rochford. It makes a statement. We have fantastic connections to key employment markets in Basildon, Thurrock and Southend-on-Sea by both road and rail. I disagree with that statement. I don't think we do have fantastic connections. I think we should maybe set a vision to develop fantastic connections rather than we have them. Other points on, and I think Councillor Mr Newport may have covered them, on the 3.3, which talks about specific action plans. I'd be interested to see a timetable for development of those action plans rather than just the span of the...
okay, thank you.
Rather than just the span of the... I understand it's a strategic plan, but the covering note talks about developing the specific action plans. I'd just like to understand the timetable.
Okay.
Also, my final point is that in the vision, again, on 6.6, it talks around the 8,000 new homes over the next 20 years. I'm not sure that that's an agreed number in the planning policy group, which hasn't met for some time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Councillor Belton, I think you wanted to come in.
Just on the previous point regarding reporting back and communications, I would certainly wanting to be communicating with members much more frequently. I don't want to wait to the end of a year to realise or to feed back that something has or hasn't worked. So whilst the annual report, the official report may be annually, I would be wanting to set up a mechanism to report back to the relevant people or members as a whole much more frequently than that, because I think this is going to be a fluid strategy where things are changing and developing, and it's important that we know and then learn from any mistakes or take advantage of things that are working well.
Okay, thank you.
I meant to mention in relation to the point Councillor Cross made about reducing car parking charges. Essex CC, as you know, have a policy to reduce use of cars and encourage use of public transport, which would support the carbon neutral approach. Encouraging car use by reducing car parking prices actually might increase our carbon output.
Yeah, thank you. Mr Houghton?
Thank you. So I think you've touched on the reporting back, didn't you? So the action plans, I think we'd have to come back with I'd have to speak to the officers involved to actually come back with some proper dates for that. So I'd be reluctant to state now what those dates would be. In terms of like the 8,000 homes, it is what the government says at this time. So I take your point. It's not it's not an enforced policy, but it is, you know, you'd find that in many documents it's a signposting that is where our targets are at this time. Doesn't mean as a council would approve that, but it is what's planned, if that makes sense. And the car parking charge, I said, well, a detail that we could probably spend the whole committee discussing if we wanted to, but not for tonight, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to come back to Councillor Foster, and he has a very valid point about reducing carbon emissions and not encouraging transport and encouraging public transport. Very good point. Maybe we could offer free parking to electric vehicles and potentially hybrid vehicles as an incentive to encourage people to, or an added incentive to encourage people to look at electric and hybrid vehicles. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Could I, if you'll indulge me, I've got a point that I would like to recommend, and it wasn't my idea, it was Councillor Bob Milne and some of the stuff that Councillor Reeves and Councillor Wilkinson have mentioned to me previously. But we should be looking at innovative ways to regenerate and grow our high streets. And one of the suggestions was that we look at the work that Chelmsford City Council have undertaken and see whether we can learn any lessons from them and whether they are appropriate to be applied within our district.
I think the short answer is yes. I mean, we're always welcome to look at what other sort of authorities are doing in terms of best practice, so yes.
Okay, thank you. Members, are there any further questions? Councillor Mrs Gadsden.
I was just wondering if the council has considered having a graduate employment programme of local residents that go to university and then taken on board and mentored here locally by our councillors, and also as a way of progression planning.
Thank you.
I mean, I suppose it's almost a wider question than the economic strategy, but certainly something happy to take away and discuss. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There are no further members indicating, so we have a number of recommendations that came out, and what I'd like to do is, Sonia, if you could read out. Sorry, Sonia, if you could read them out, and then if it's your recommendation, can you just indicate that you're happy that is your recommendation?
So the first one I picked up was the first bullet point at 5.1, reducing the figure at that first bullet point to £5,000, allowing £5,000 then to be invested into skills training initiatives. Then we've got a recommendation around having sort of smart and measurable sort of objectives, names, and you know, clear KPIs which are around sort of measurability. Somebody mentioned the video promotion, whether or not that should be local and should engage with local schools. I don't know if that's something that you want to include as one of the recommendations.
That's one that I put forward, Chairman. If we're looking to purchase branding and film production, then let's do it locally. So a local business, or ideally one of our schools have got the skills to provide that service. Thank you.
Just to double check and just to clarify, can we make sure that's for all of the promotional, not just the video? Because I completely agree with you, Councillor McPherson. We need to be encouraging local business.
So marketing and promotion more generally.
That whole section, yeah.
Then I think there was a recommendation around encouraging businesses to use Google Business as well as Rochford Local.
Yep.
KPIs we've already covered, and a recommendation around RDC looking at the partnership with Brentwood Borough Council to look at the skills and ideas that they have to see whether there are any transferable that we could use. And I think, other than that...
There was another recommendation around looking at Chelmsford City.
Yes, so basically the last one I've picked up is around looking at innovative ways to regenerate the high street, and can we learn any lessons from Chelmsford City Council to see if those can be applied to our district.
Thanks. Thanks, Sonia. Councillor Eves is indicating.
I think you missed one where I asked for the figures that actually appear in the report 6.2 on section 5.1 for the figures for the promotional materials and branding for the council to be reflected as being less than what we are actually spending on investment in training, skills and projects. So as I think we had agreement on that.
No, that's the one where I've asked for the 10,000.
Is that, can I just clarify, is that the one where Councillor Mrs McPherson asked about reducing the promotional material by £5,000 and using that as using that extra money for training?
Yes, doesn't matter what the figure is, but I think the figure should be higher for investment in skills training initiatives and projects. So, for instance, if we then reduced the place promotion, etc., to £5,000, as Councillor McPherson has recommended, then those last two items that are down as 5,000 should be down as 10,000 each.
Yeah.
That's
Okay, yeah. I think that's covered. Yeah, I think that's covered by that. So we've got that. Okay, members. Sorry, Councillor Foster.
The comment about fantastic connections, which I think is incorrect. I talked about developing infrastructure to create fantastic connections.
And I don't want to put words into your mouth, but are you recommending that we change that to say that we looked... Okay, welcome back, members. Can you all see the screen? Or if you can turn around and see the screen. Once again, this is a test of my relatively new glasses, but I can actually see from here. And what we'll do is we'll go through, we've got 3 recommendations, and what we'll do is we'll take a vote on each recommendation. Oh, sorry, there's more below. So each recommendation, I will read the recommendation. I will ask an indication those who are for the recommendation, those against, and any abstentions. So the first recommendation is that on paragraph 5.1 of the report, that the £10,000 budget earmarked to improve place promotion materials and branding be decreased to £5,000, that the £5,000 earmarked to invest in skills, training and initiative be increased to £10,000, and that the contingency be increased from £5,000 to give greater opportunity for emerging projects to be taken forward. Members, could I please have a show of hands of those that are in favour of this recommendation? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. The second recommendation... Don't move it. The second recommendation is that there should be clear, smart, measurable KPIs. Could I have a show of hands of those that are in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Third recommendation is that the procurement of marketing and promotion should be local and engage with local schools and businesses where possible, and in accordance with the Council's financial and procurement rules. Those members in favour, please indicate. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. The fourth recommendation, to encourage businesses to use Google Business as well as Rochford Local. Those members in favour, please indicate. That's unanimous. Thanks, members. The fifth recommendation is to work with Brentford Borough Council to develop skills and capacity around the economic development to deliver the strategy. Those members in favour of the recommendation, please indicate. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. The sixth recommendation is that on page 6.7 of the report that the words fantastic connections be replaced with encourage the development of fantastic connections. Those in favour of the recommendation, please indicate. Those against? Those abstaining? Okay. Thank you. That recommendation is approved. And the final recommendation is to consider innovative ways to regenerate the high street, and in particular whether we can learn any lessons from another council, for example Chelmsford City Council, which can be applied in the district. Those in favour of the recommendation? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. So, members, we've got two recommendations to the executive that are set out in paragraph 8.1 on page 6.3 of the report. And the recommendation is that the draft economic development strategy be approved as set out in the appendix with the recommendations made at this meeting. Those in favour of the recommendation. So that is the recommendations within the report together with the recommendations from this committee meeting now. Would those in favour please indicate? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. We now move on to agenda item 7, which is the key decision document. And yeah, yeah, of course. Sorry. Yep. Yep. Please feel free. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the second recommendation. Well spotted. Yeah, recommendation 2 on the report is that the delegated authority be given to the Assistant Director, Place and Environment in consultation with the portfolio holder, Climate and Economy, to make any necessary minor amendments to the draft economic development strategy in advance of publication. Is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 7, which is the key decisions document. And what I'll do is I will go through each item, and if any member wishes to comment, please raise your hand. So the first key decision, reference 14/21, is to do with the provision of internal audit services. Okay.
No one's indicating,
Okay,
Chairman.
no one's indicating. Thank you. Yeah.
Just ask one brief question. I know there is something else. I've seen another report on this somewhere else. I don't know where. I just wondered if we could find out why. Sorry. Why given the current policies it were of linking more closely with Brentwood, why we're linking on this instance more closely with Basildon. I don't know if that can be taken to the.
Yeah, as I understand it, I think, I understood that we already were with Basildon.
We've actually appointed executives employed by Basildon Borough Council, and he's been working with the council for a number of years, so we've already got that connectivity.
Right, okay. Yeah, I'll take that away and I'll get a report back to you on that, Councillor Hoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Would it be sent to all members?
Oh, yeah, it'll be sent. Yeah, no, sorry, your point. I will answer your point, but I'll send.
There is a report on this going to council on the 14th of June.
Okay. There's a report going to the full council on the 14th of June on this. Right, yeah. Okay. Next one is key decision 01/22, which is the Environmental Health Service Plan. Anyone wishing to make observation? Okay, no one's indicating. Thank you. 02/22, which is the Modern Slavery Act. Any members wishing to comment or make a note? Okay, no one is indicating. Thank you. 03/22 is the suspension of parking charges on Saturdays before Christmas. Any members wish to comment? No, no one is indicating. 0422 is the voluntary sector grant allocation. Any member wish to make note or comment? Okay, no one's indicating. Key decision 522 is to agree an update on the asset delivery programme. Anyone wish? Councillor Cross?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a point to note here, this doesn't look like a decision to me, to agree an update on the asset delivery programme. I mean, we should expect updates continuously, surely. It's not a decision, it's that's my point. It's not, you know, it's not a decision, it's an update. So it doesn't fit the definition given on the first page.
Okay, I'll take that away. I understand the point you're making. I will take that away and get clarification on that. Okay, thank you. Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if we could add to the title of decision there to agree an update on the asset delivery programme, including the current financial position.
Okay, I'll make a note of that.
Thank you.
As well, thank you. Nobody else has indicated, thank you. And then 622, which is to approve an arrangement to share staff with Brentwood Borough Council pursuant to Section 113 of the Local Government Act 1972. Okay, no one's indicated. Thank you, members. So we now move on to agenda item 8, which is the work plan. So we'll go through the work plan, and what I'll do is, if members are happy, I will add in some of the points that we were or that have been raised by members for inclusion in the work plan. So on the 6th of July meeting, we've got the Treasury Management Annual Review of 2021-2022. If possible, I would encourage you to do the training that is coming up in June. Now, I know that Councillor Wilkinson raised the point about this training is only being provided during the day. I've asked Sonia to look at that. It's probably unlikely that we'll be able to do this June training in the evening, but it will be recorded because it's being delivered by Zoom, so it will be made available. We're looking at the One Team transformation programme, the strategic partnership with Brentford Borough Council, and then the litter strategy. And I think just to check with Mr. Houghton, that is pre-scrutiny, is it? Okay, thank you. You'll see on the 6th of September, we're not showing anything in the plan, but I know that at the pre-meeting there was a cross-party consensus that members wanted to have an update on the ADP programme. And I took an action to set up a meeting with the Chief Executive, the Leader and Deputy Leader of the Council, and myself and the Vice Chair. Because it was, we've had the bank holiday, I've not been able to set that meeting up, but we will, and that will then start to flesh out the terms of the review, the information we're looking. And I'll obviously consult with members on that. Okay. 4th of October is the regulation of the Investigatory Powers Act, RIPA, Councillor Constable's favourite. But also what we've, sorry, Councillor Hoy, yeah.
Carry on,
Yeah, okay. And also, so that's to look at the annual review of policy and usage. Sorry, I meant to say in September, we'd also agreed that we would look at the how the review of the former review committee was working. And what I would like to do is ask someone other than myself and the Vice Chair to lead that piece of work. So it's taking the report that came in last year to look at how we're doing and how we should improve, and to produce a short report to measure ourselves against that. And it wouldn't be right that the Vice Chair and I do that, because we'd be marking our own homework. So I'd look for a volunteer for that. So, Councillor Hoy, sorry.
Yeah, just on the RIPA one, it's just some clarification to start with. Because I understand RIPA cascades down to the parish council level and town council level, and that they have people appointed under RIPA for themselves to apply it. I've been aware that a security company operating locally has said that they do operate covertly, and it's employed by a number of parish councils. So my question is, could that be looked at within that review?
Yep, I've made a note of that, and I'll take that with Louisa Moss and ask her to include that. Yep, thank you. November, we've not got anything in. 1st of December is the Treasury Management 2022-23 mid-year review. There's nothing in January penciled in. February, we've got the Treasury Management Strategy and the Annual Investment Strategy and Minimum Reserve Provision Policy. The 1st of March, we've got the Community Safety Partnership, and then April next year, we've got our annual report. And so what I would be looking for is we've got some key pieces of work that we'll be looking at, and I would like recommendations from members for this work, any extra work that goes in. Okay, so I'm not asking you to sign up now, but what I would say is we should be, in line with the report that came out, we should be making much better use of task and finish groups, and what that means is that members will need to get involved in leading that work. Sorry, there was one actually, sorry, I'm looking at Councillor Wilkinson, who's frowning at me, because we did agree that you wanted to look at the policies around enforcement, and that you said you'd be happy to lead that piece of work.
Well, I acknowledge your request, shall we say.
Nicely put. And I think we were looking to do that probably, if I remember right, we'll set a date in the plan, but that is definitely a piece of work that we'd be looking to do. And I think there was another piece of work that was suggested by Councillor Newport, and we'll look to schedule that in, and it's a good job that Mr Houghton is still here, is to look around the whole of the planning process. So it's not the legislative aspects of it, it's not the legal aspects, it's about how we operate our planning process. And one of the examples that was given to me was things like distribution of Section 106 money, that sort of thing. Okay, so that's like a bit. I haven't got a volunteer for that, but I'm sure I'll be able to find one. Okay, thank you. So that's the work plan. So we now move on to item 9, which is the location of HMS Beagle anchor at Pagglesham, and this was a decision that was called in. Sorry, Councillor Myers.
Just to ask a question before we actually start discussing it, is because it appeared in yesterday's Echo, the fact that we'd already given the money to Pagglesham Council.
And you've just preempted about what I was about to say. Thank you, yeah. What I would say is that if you have seen the article in the Echo, can I ask you to disregard it when we're making any recommendation or decision tonight? We make our decision purely on the discussions and the information that is given to us within this committee meeting. So please, if you have seen it, please disregard it. Don't let it influence your decision one way or the other. So what I would like to very quickly do is to highlight, I don't find my paper. Yeah. So the reasons for calling, excuse me, another piece. So the reasons for calling this in were that the original funding that was given for the Beagle project was for distributing to projects across the district, and there were members that were concerned that this was only going into one particular project. The second reason was that there were other options available. So, for example, perhaps giving a grant, and it was whether those had been considered. And subsequently, it's one of the concerns that was raised by a number of members was that whether this anchor really is the anchor from the Beagle, and is there some risk in the future that it's shown that it isn't the Beagle's anchor, and the council is given is embarrassed by this, so it's reputational damage to the council. So I'd like to hand over to Councillor FD, Councillor Williams and Angela Hutchings to present.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can take the questions as they were in the order in which they were posed. The original funding was, of course, for a district-wide festival that was planned specifically to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the launch of HMS Beagle in 2020. The moment has somewhat passed in that 2 years have elapsed due to COVID, where events couldn't take place. In conjunction with the then portfolio holder, Councillor FD, we explored potential to try Beagle commemoration and the objects of this original project into the Rayleigh Trinity Fair, but frankly the timetable didn't work, and therefore we would be in a position where we were looking at doing it in 2023. On that basis, and because the motivation behind the project was becoming ever more distant, it was suggested that we might consider doing something to support the work of Paghwisham Parish Council, who had already begun the anchor project themselves. So this is a project that the Parish Council has incepted. They have used other grant funding and also funding from their own coffers, and it was a suggestion by which we could use some of the reserves. The recommendation, Mr. Chairman, says up to support that project and to essentially finish off the Beagle project and the objectives that were originally set. In relation to issues around provenance, quite clearly it's very difficult to, in the absence of a direct identifying mark, to say that any item that is 200 years old is directly linked to the ship. However, the provenance that's cited in the report comes from work done by Historic England, who worked with us originally in relation to the anchor project, and at that point we were looking to apply for funding from Historic England to support Paghwisham Parish, but that again through the intervention of the pandemic meant that funding application never took place. And the Parish Council decided to move ahead with its own project. So the provenance, so far as we are aware, is as set out in the report, but in the absence of any, as I say, absolute identifying mark, we can never say with any certainty that it absolutely is. So it is a nature of the beast, unfortunately, Chairman, that in terms of provenance, we only have what we have.
The whole project right from the start over provenance. I don't wish to diss any of the work that has been put into this, which has been vast, but I have to say on the recommendation that is here for spending or up to just under £14,000 on reciting an anchor that may or may not be that from the Beagle seems extremely excessive. And I would suggest that there are far, far better projects that this money could go to promote tourism in the area. It's unfortunate, but the hard facts are that we don't have any proof of provenance, even of the boat that is supposedly in the mud dock. As I've read certain historians' reports that have actually said that they think it's actually an oyster fleet vessel. So I think that that there are questions over the whole thing. My concern is exactly as the chair has actually said, is that in future that this may come back to bite the council and be a little bit of an embarrassment. So I can't support this. I'm sorry, but thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other members wish to speak? Councillor Newport. Sorry, yeah, Angela.
Yeah, sorry, if I can just
Yeah.
come back, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Reeves, it's not, you're absolutely right, there is no proof that the ship is in situ, and I've been very clear that we've never claimed that it is. The mud dock designation by Historic England back in 2020 acknowledged that mud dock was the last known resting place of the ship. And that is supported by documentary records. But whether it is still in the estuary mud is a matter that we can't quantify, and it may or may not be another ship, but certainly the ship was in that place back in the 1800s.
Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it does seem a lot of money to be up to allocating for one grant, if you like, to a parish council. So in a positive light, I'd like to make a recommendation that, okay, well, perhaps the funding should be capped at a certain amount of money to be determined by the committee or portfolio holder could suggest, maybe. But I think some of the other money could be well spent. Perhaps Rayleigh Museum may be able to set up some sort of a beagle exhibition and use that money towards something positive for other people in the district, as it would take people from Rayleigh around an hour and a quarter to get there on a bus. So I don't think that would be too attractive to travel all the way to Paglesham to learn about the beagle as well. So maybe we could distribute some of the funding across the district. So that's what I'd like to make a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. I noted that. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with some of the context from Councillor Newport. However, I would err on something like perhaps a roadshow that went around the schools to talk to the pupils there around the beagle and its impact on us. Again, concerns about this amount. So perhaps somebody could answer, has the parish council had a figure already? If this is now in situ, our officer from planning is here, so he can probably say if it's gone through the planning process, obviously, any sort of confirmation of that and the costs relating to it. And perhaps if we know that amount, that is the recommendation that we could possibly put forward to contribute towards that.
So can you sort of, what exactly are you asking in terms of costs?
Sorry. From my understanding is it's now in situ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's gone through the planning process and it's now there. What was the cost to actually install this anchor? Do we know that? Thank you.
So Councillor McPherson, the work that has been done with the project to date is within the gift of Paglesham Parish Council. We've not been part of the project at all. So any works that have been undertaken to date have been undertaken by the Parish Council on their own effort. So I couldn't tell you what has been done and what has not been done, and I can't tell you what has been spent.
So we have a problem there, Chair, right away, where there is the possibility that up to 13,755 pounds could be spent on this, but we've no idea of the cost. We've already been told the parish has received grant funding, unless I heard that wrong. So if we knew the cost and the paper then came back to us with that detail and asking for a contribution, we have something to work on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy, and thank you, Chair, through you. The report makes it clear that there's a potential number of suggestions for the deployment of the funds, which included an interpretation board, steel edging, support lighting, signage, and an exhibition. The siting of the anchor and its placement is not within the list of things that's proposed to be done. It is intended at this stage which is why it says, Chair, that it's up to £13,775.18, which is the balance of the unspent budget. And it's just a list of suggestions that the portfolio holder may or may not agree to go along with. So it remains up to this committee, Chairman, through you to make any recommendations that it thinks appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Myers.
Some of the questions already been asked. I was just wondering what were they actually going to do with this £13,000 if the anchor's already where it's supposed to be?
Well, as it says in the report, Chairman, the suggestion was that the money would be used to provide security, lighting, some decorative edging around the plinth, additional signage and interpretation boards.
From what I understand, it's been in someone's front garden for a few years and it hasn't been stolen from there.
It's less an issue of theft and more an issue of security and vandalism, but I take your point.
Thank you. Councillor Constable.
I think the question I was going to ask has now been answered by Angela, because my understanding was there was more than just the anchor. There was a walk around that area to end up with there, and paths and sight boards, because if you walk around that area there's a lot there, and I think there was further plans by the parish council to open up the whole area with other things for people to see in that area. So I don't think, from what I remember from the report, that it was just that one item. Perhaps Councillor Efty could enlighten us more on that.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Efty.
This was going to be part of tourism heritage. So it's not just about the anchor, it's about encouraging people to go and be part of the Darwin story. So this is where hopefully, as far as we know, where the boat ended up, and as far as we know, this is the anchor, and people would go and see it, people would go and look at the signboards, the interpretation boards. They would also go and visit Wallasey and look at the app, so we can see the boat and everything else. It's going to be a part of the Darwin story in Pagglesham, which is the other side of the district from Rayleigh, which would be quite nice because we've got loads of heritage in Rayleigh with the windmill and other bits and pieces, and it'd just be nice to open up the district. So it's more about encouraging people to be part of that story.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hoy.
Thank you. I'm concerned about the open-endedness of the money. It's up to 13,000. I know I'm reading the detail here of what they plan to do, but I haven't seen any costing. I would expect Councillor Efty has seen costings of this, or suggested costings, hopefully. Councillor Williams said, sorry, that's the wrong department. So that's to Councillor Williams, if there are costings from Pagglesham about how much they do need to spend, so that there is an accurate idea of how much money should be spent. I'm minded at the moment to agree with Councillor Newport about this may not be and Councillor McPherson actually, about this may not be the best way to spend all of the money. There could be better ways to spend a large chunk of it. So at the moment I'm minded not to agree, but I just wanted some clarification around the costings. Thank you.
So Councillor Williams, you were indicating.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any idea of how much they've actually spent at the moment and how much they plan on spending. I did go out there yesterday to look for the anchor, and I did find it, and I have to say I was less than impressed with the way that this project has been taken forward. Unfortunately, what happened is that the pandemic came along and has put a block on a lot of things that were to be done or should have been done. as I say, I'm not happy with what I saw yesterday, and I would be more than happy to accept the recommendation of this committee and look at that further and come back to the committee if necessary.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hoy.
A motion, even, that this is taken away by the portfolio holder to look at again and to come back with either ideas on, or to come back with either concrete costings for it so we know what we are spending and other alternative uses for the money, which could be, as Councillor McPherson said, a tour of the schools about the history of the Beagle, or perhaps talking to the Raleigh Town Museum about holding an exhibition.
Agree.
Okay.
Second that.
Do we have a seconder for that?
Thank you.
Is that a it's a recommendation rather than a motion?
We will have to take, it's a recommendation, but we will have to take a vote on that recommendation.
Yeah.
So, so we've got the recommendation. Okay, sorry, Councillor Reeves, you were indicating.
Yeah, following on from Councillor Efty and his explanation of what the funds would actually go to, it's not actually what is in the recommendation that is in front of us. What we've got actually in front of us is for the money to be available to fund activities associated with the relocation, conservation and promotion of the HMS Beagle anchor. That is very precise. If there are other things that are associated with the HMS Beagle, then I would suggest that we need to reword that paragraph, because if we're looking at walks and if we're looking at storyboards, etc., along the walks, etc., that is not covered in this recommendation here, and therefore would be a little bit difficult to justify the spending of the money on.
Can I ask if my motion was seconded?
It was, yeah.
So then we should be talking to the motion, which means that that report is no longer...
I don't think we're allowed motions. I think
It's the recommendation, and we'll vote on that recommendation to go into the report. But yeah, you've got a seconder on it.
So my point was we should be talking to the motion. We don't have
Recommendation.
motions in review then.
We will do presently, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it needs to go back to the portfolio holder because it was called in from the, yeah. Sorry, Councillor Reeves, you were...
Yeah, I was just saying that 1.2 in the report, I think that needs to be rewritten on the evidence that we've just been given by Councillor Efty as to what he thinks the money is going to be spent on, because this is very precise on what the money is going to be spent on, whereas what Councillor Efty has suggested that it is spent on is not what is covered in this paragraph.
Yeah. Angela.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, just to remind members that this is a call-in of a decision by the portfolio holder. So the objective of the call-in is to ask the portfolio holder to reconsider his decision, and therefore a recommendation that the portfolio holder do reconsider that decision and the amount of funding to be made available in the terms that have currently been described, i.e. that it should be less than the sum set out in the report and with the balance redistributed to other projects within the district, is a sufficient recommendation for the portfolio holder to consider and take back when making his review of that report. So there is no need to make any motion or any change to any of the recommendations. It's simply asking the portfolio holder to reconsider their decision.
Okay. Any other members wishing to speak? Councillor Foster.
In the report 3.7, it spells out some alternative usages, as Angela Hutchins mentioned earlier, and I think we should be asking the portfolio holder to come back with some costings against those proposals, and we can make some specific decisions.
It doesn't need to come back. We're just going to ask the portfolio holder.
Yeah, it doesn't need to come back. All we're going to be asking the portfolio holder is to reconsider. So, members, we've got really three options, or I've got three options to put to you. The first is that if you are happy with the decision as put forward originally by the portfolio holder, then we would recommend that the decision stands. But I get the sense from the discussion that's gone on, that members are not minded to do that. So the next option that we have is to refer the matter back to the executive and confirm for the meeting record the nature of our concerns, and it can also include a recommendation to the executive from this committee. So we've got, sorry, Angela, could you read out that recommendation again, please?
Yes, Chair, or I can project it if that would help, but the recommendation is that the portfolio holder for communities and health reconsider the decision, and the amount of funding to be made available to Paglesham Parish Council for the Anchor project should be less than the £13,755.18 available, with the balance redistributed to other projects around the district.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Hopefully Councillor Williams will be able to answer this. Bearing in mind the fact there has been this Echo article, which I haven't seen, and this decision's already been taken.
We don't include that.
No.
Hang, sorry,
Yeah.
what I was going to ask was, I assumed that the money's not been given over. Right.
Chairman, through you, if a key decision is called in, then the decision does not have effect until such time as the call-in has been completed. So it's an inaccurate report by the Echo.
No, sorry. I'm sorry for mentioning the Echo. I was not trying to muddy the waters. I'm more interested in the fact that the decision had been taken, so to make sure the money hadn't gone. But you've answered the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. So, Angela, could you, just for the final time, could you read the recommendation, please? And then I would look for... I will move it from here, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the recommendation, members, is that the portfolio holder for communities and health reconsider the decision, and the amount of funding to be made available to Paglesham Parish Council for the Anchor project should be less than the £13,755.18 available, with the balance redistributed to other projects around the district.
Okay, thank you, Angela. I will move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Reeves, thank you. Can those members in favour of the recommendation please indicate? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, members. That is the final agenda item. So the meeting is closed at 21:08. Thank you, members.